You're listening to another episode of the Coaster101 podcast. I'm Andrew Stillwell, and we're going theme park adjacent this week. It's a little bit of a dead time in the theme parks, so we're talking about a new museum exhibit up in Philadelphia at the Franklin Institute. For those who are unaware, it is the 100th anniversary of the Walt Disney Company, and at the Franklin Institute, there is a brand new museum exhibition that kind of showcases all things Walt Disney Company, parks, films, everything, and in between Disney. They've got it at this exhibit. But the good news is I have an expert on the topic of this museum installation and this exhibit. She is a 2022 Top 50 Blooloop Museum Influencer. She is the Chief Experience and Strategy Officer at the Franklin Institute, and strangely enough, she also happens to be my cousin, and I'm not making this up, but we're going to welcome in Abby Bysshe. Abby, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I was telling you a little bit off the podcast, or before we started recording, that I had my brother JT on, and we're going to keep the family affair going on the Coaster101 podcast. And with this new exhibit that opened, last weekend, I figured no better guest than you to kind of tell us all things about, the Franklin Institute, but also the Disney 100 exhibit. So appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
But, before we get into it, let's go a little bit into your background and, the kind of museum space. You're not named a top 50 influencer by Blooloop just by happenstance, but, what's your personal history as it relates to museums and the Franklin Institute?
Sure. So I have been in the museum industry for almost 20 years. I started in the art museum world at the National Gallery of Art. I was in their design department, so did everything from maquette building to plan layouts, anything, model building, all kinds of crazy stuff. And left there and went to the National Geographic Society and was their director of museum partnerships. So that really gave me a global understanding of the museum business. I ran their touring exhibit business there, as well as trying to figure out ways to get speakers or books, any kind of content coming out of National Geographic into museums. So I learned a ton about the business of museums and kind of where their struggles were from a content perspective, but also reported up through the theme park side of National Geographic. So learned a lot about the location-based entertainment world, as well as the theme park world. So I really got a good education there that I think really prepared me to move over to the Franklin Institute. And I was initially brought on to oversee their inbound touring exhibit program. So the Franklin Institute is going to be 200 years old next year. It's a really large science center, one of the largest in the country, and has about 20,000 square feet of temporary space. So touring exhibitions is a huge piece of their business model because we are mostly earned revenue dependent, meaning we make money selling tickets. So what that kind of experiential program looks like every year is very important. So we do try and go after some of the largest touring exhibits in the marketplace. And that's what kind of leads us to the Harry Potters and the Disneys and the Marvels. We get a lot of comments about, there's no science content in those, but we really see what we do on the touring exhibit side as a way to drive attendance that may not normally come to the museum. And then they'll spend, 3.5 hours in the museum also enjoying science content. So it's best of both worlds. We build a really robust kind of business that also helps the city of Philadelphia with hotels and restaurants and everything else, but also brings in people that normally wouldn't step foot in a science museum.
Understood. And I will kind of agree with you on the, you don't necessarily think Disney and science, but, listeners of this show will know there's enough science at amusement parks too. It will absolutely make sense by the end of the day. But you did mention Harry Potter. I want to talk about some of these other, traveling exhibits. And I think this is the third world premiere exhibit that you guys have had at the Franklin Institute, following the Harry Potter experience and then Crayola Idea Works, the creativity exhibition. What can, I have no idea how the museum space works, but how does an exhibit on Crayola or a exhibit on Harry Potter or this Disney exhibit, how do they choose the Franklin Institute of all places to kind of have their debut? And I'm not asking any all places in like a negative way. I'm just, you don't necessarily think Harry Potter, Philadelphia. You don't think Disney, Philadelphia. So what is it about the Franklin Institute that kind of brings in these new and exciting exhibits?
So just as a background on how most of these exhibitions work. So a Crayola or Warner Brothers or a Disney will go out and look for a promoter to partner with who will raise money against and build these touring exhibitions. And then we are more of a venue, so we rent them basically. Mm-hmm. So we're not developing these exhibitions. We're just housing them for a period of time. So I think the main reason Philadelphia is a world premiere for things and or the second venue or the North American premiere. One has to do with the fact that we have incredible relationships across the touring exhibit world. So we know when these projects are getting developed. We know these promoters really well. But Philadelphia as a market is just an incredible place. I mean, Harry Potter, we did people from over 45 countries, every single state. So it's just a place that drives a ton of business. We usually do better than a New York location. We do better than a DC location. We've just become kind of a place that again and again really drives the numbers that are needed for these kind of large projects. And it really sets the stage for a tour that really creates the momentum that allows for it to do well in other locations.
Right. And you mentioned the 20,000 square feet of kind of event space, bonus space, whatever we want to call this. How does like a build out like this occur? Do you say, hey, we have a 20,000 square foot box and you guys, talking to Disney or Warner Brothers or Crayola or whoever, do you say, here's our diagram. You can build it however you want it. Does the museum have any influence in kind of how the space is laid out? Or is it just, here's your 20,000 square foot box, fit what you want and what you can in there?
It depends a little bit. I mean, since we do have these good relationships, and if it's a world premiere that's never been in a space before, there's usually a little bit more back and forth about things, pitfalls that we've seen in past exhibitions that we've had that we don't want to happen again, because that, is a huge issue with throughput. What interactivity can do for an exhibition, what our audience is looking for. So we do have some early on conversations, but in general, and this is what's tough about the touring exhibit business, they're building a product to go into multiple spaces. So they're making decisions that's going to allow them to be flexible, whether it's in 20,000 square feet or 15 or 25. So we don't always have the end say to create an experience exactly the way we would want to. And we're also really good partners. So like in both Harry Potter and Disney, we'll be working with the partners after it opens, be like, we saw this really weird user experience going on in this one area. If you make a couple changes here, we think that'll improve understanding of this interactive or flow through this area. So it ends up being a lot of back and forth once real live people are in the space, because that, you can plan a ton, but still miss things because you just can't expect some of the weird visitor behavior that happens.
Right. Understood. And especially, I feel like with fandoms, Disney, Harry Potter specifically, we're not going to say anything bad about the guests at the Franklin Institute, but there's probably some weird behaviors. That's just based on the fandoms.
It is. There's a super fan thing that happens, and we saw it this weekend. People read everything, and they don't want to miss anything. So it just slows everything down from a throughput perspective, because people are in there for an hour and a half because they want to soak up every single piece of content. And you don't really see that in a non-super fan style show, because you're like more middle of the road with, how people feel about a specific topic area. But no, when you talk Harry Potter and Disney, you're talking super fan.
Right. And so you did mention, it was taking the super fans, an hour and a half because they're reading everything, but maybe not for the super fan, but for somebody who comes to the exhibit sometime in the next 6 months, it's exhibiting at the Franklin Institute. What can guests expect at the Disney 100 exhibition?
Yeah, so this was a partnership with Walt Disney Archives. So it really is history into modern times, story of the Walt Disney Company, supported by artifacts, drawings, video, music, stuff for movies. So it really kind of runs the gamut as far as an exhibition goes. So I would say there's something for everybody in this exhibition, whether you have nostalgia for Mary Poppins and some of the more like early Disney things, or Frozen and some of the more current stuff is kind of where it's at, or you're a Star Wars fan, or you're a Marvel fan, or you're a Pixar fan. Like it really hits on the company at large. So you would be hard pressed to not find something that you connect with, I think.
I love it. It sounds great. And I'd say I'm above casual, like somewhere between casual and diehard, I think is where I kind of draw the line. And it's mostly theme park related, but I do have my, fair share of Disney VHS movies collecting dust somewhere at my parents' house right now. But you mentioned some of these, kind of the unique artifacts, and, there's pictures online. So you've got like the shoe, or the glass slipper rather, from the live action Cinderella. And you've got, ride vehicles from some of these parks. What are some of the more unique pieces of history, in your opinion, that have kind of come to this exhibition?
I'm a sucker for early animation drawings. So that's the kind of animation cell, seeing how things were drawn out in various cells and then run together to make a movie. That's the kind of stuff I really get into. There's one section of the exhibition called Innoventions, I always say that wrong, that talks a little bit more about the Imagineers and animatronics and early animatronic kind of switchboards. That's the kind of stuff that I geek out for, because I find that super, super interesting, early robotics and early animation techniques. So that's kind of where I live in that exhibit.
But yeah, it is the 100 years, and it's everything Walt Disney Company. Yeah. So it is that early animation from, the early studio concepts and things like that, up until the Marvel and the Star Wars and all of their recent kind of corporate acquisitions, to the fact that, they own pretty much everything that isn't Amazon at this point.
Yes.
But, there's, at the very beginning, you're greeted, I think is the best way to say, by this hologram of Walt Disney. I've seen on TikTok people have called it a deep fake. I've seen it called a hologram. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the technology behind this and what you actually feel it to be, if it is a deep fake or a hologram? Or
I would not call it a hologram. So okay. I think the reason people say that is because there are several mesh screens in front of the main screen. So there's definitely a three-dimensionality to the overall piece. But Walt is sitting on that back screen, so I would not categorize that as a hologram. From my understanding, it is a deep fake. So it's his actual words, because he did give the speech, but it was never recorded. So it's my understanding that they just took kind of the similar to like Mandalorian kind of technique, and use that to kind of recreate that speech in a visual manner.
Gotcha. Okay. And does that, based on the guest feedback, does it kind of catch people off guard that they've got like this kind of three-dimensional but not really version of Walt Disney that is like, looking at them and talking at them, or talking to them?
Yeah, it's funny. So on Saturday when we opened, I was up in that kind of gallery watching throughput and human interaction with that piece. And they were like, gosh, he looks so young. I can't believe he's so young. And they got that video and I was like, yeah, that's a deep fake. They were like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
That does. Oh gosh, everybody they do have this visual of Walt Disney was about the time he was, creating Disneyland, creating Walt Disney World. And it's the older part of his life. And so to see kind of young Walt Disney, it's probably a little bit unsettling, but
in color.
and in color.
Yeah.
And, it's like your very own wonderful world of Disney.
Yeah.
For our audience specifically, I do know there is a Matterhorn bobsled car.
Yes.
But what are some other, just off the top of your head, some theme park specific artifacts that one might find in this exhibition?
We actually had Bob Gurr at the opening, who I think designed that, which was super awesome. He's great. So there's that. There's the Peter Pan ride vehicle. Like, these are like the only. I'm not good at theme park rides. Full disclosure, but I've been on all of the classics in Disneyland. So I'm like, oh yeah, I've ridden in that. They also have. What is it? Mr. Toad's?
Mr. Toad's Wild Ride.
Yes, the devil from that. So they have a couple pieces like pulled from the parks that are in there. They did a nice job of kind of some scenic treatment in that space as well. And then they really do talk about just kind of the worldwide presence of those parks. There's a large digital table that you can kind of dive a little bit into what's going on around the world as far as the parks system goes. So it's really kind of a worldwide view, kind of travelogue of what's going on in the parks.
Yeah. And I've got to ask, since you brought it up, I mean, I know Bob Gurr almost specifically from the Disney Plus Imagineering story.
Yeah.
And it seems like he would just be an absolute blast to just hang out with, and in true elderly gentleman fashion, just sit there for hours and just listen to him tell stories. But did you have any personal interaction with him, or was it a very quick, just keep moving?
Yeah, it was a very quick. He was there to do a lot of press. So he had a very tight schedule, but just the fact that he was just there through press, through the VIP opening, engaging with people, walking through the exhibit, engaging with press, to have that much energy when I get to be that age would be a dream. He's just a lovely individual and seems to really love talking about his career and the Disney brand. He's just a wonderful spokesperson for Disney.
Well, if you can use your Disney connections to get him on this podcast, from cousin to cousin, I would really appreciate it.
I will see what I can do.
I love it. Well, it did open on Saturday, and I did notice on the website that you sold out both Saturday and Sunday, and with Monday being a holiday. Yep. So how's guest feedback been?
It's been really great. I think, when we had Harry Potter, it was very crowded in there. It's still pretty crowded in Disney, but I think the layout of the exhibit gives people a little bit more room to move around. I think that always increases guest satisfaction. But again, I think this group that was here this weekend are definitely people who purchased tickets like when they went on sale in November. So you're seeing people travel long distances to come. They're really, really into the content. And the joke was, we're Disney people. We're used to waiting in lines. The lines aren't that long.
It's true. I love it.
But I think Disney people, from what I've seen this weekend, are just genuinely happy people and just seem to be really enjoying themselves and really soaking in kind of every bit of this exhibition. So
perfect.
I've been happy.
What does a build out like this take to kind of, how long, was this in development, presumably before it got to the Franklin Institute, and then obviously Disney archive trucks come on site, they build it, what was the build out process like?
Yeah, so I know that the producer started working with Disney Archives on this in the fall of 2019. So this was, I think, the first all on Zoom design process that they've ever done. Which always has its own complications. And this is a company out of Germany, actually, that designed this exhibition. They also did the Marvel exhibition that we hosted in 2019. I would say because it was a world premiere and had not been fully assembled before, it took 5 weeks. That's a little long. Usually 3 weeks is kind of where you want to live from an install perspective. But just knowing it was the first time and leaving room for working out any kinks and things like that. So yeah, the build out was, and it's everything. We have to do, overhead build out for lighting and all the scenic walls that have to go up. And then the archives kind of comes in the last 2 weeks to put all the artifacts in. And then you're adding all the kind of finishing work, the projection mapping and all that stuff kind of happens in that last week. So it's definitely a production for sure.
No, for sure. And this is it is mostly the event company with a little bit of, maybe insight from you, the Franklin Institute, or is this all exhibit and Disney, and then you guys just say, here's your box, have fun with it?
No, we play a pretty big role in the
Okay.
install. So we bring our own team and outside contractors that we use on pretty much every install. We just know the building. We know the technical specs. It just makes things kind of go quicker. It also saves on them having to like bring in a ton of people. So they'll usually manage and oversee and kind of get people into groups to do all the install work. But the majority of the install team is usually local.
Okay. And then, going back to that guest feedback a little bit, what was your favorite thing you heard from a guest or anything over this first weekend? Was there anything that really just stuck out to you as we did the damn thing and we're really excited?
It's funny because I was running around a lot this weekend, so I don't know that I have an actual quote, but I can always tell that an exhibit is a success based on how long people are staying in it. If they were blowing through there, then I would say it wasn't a successful exhibition. But because people were spending the amount of time that they were spending, they were also very generous in our exit gift shop as far as how much merchandise they were purchasing, the care with which they were reading things and really engaging with the content. I just think visually, looking at the kind of human dynamic in there, it's definitely a success.
Yeah. What would you, if you had to guess, and again, this is not your diehard, read every word twice, soak it all in because this is what Walt Disney said. What's the average throughput time, you think? 45 minutes to an hour, something around those lines?
Yeah, that feels comfortable to me. I think 45 minutes to an hour is always a good benchmark for a successful amount of time in an exhibit for the price point that we charge. So we like to aim for that 45 minutes plus, and then that's like hour and a half, 2 hours for the super fan.
Okay. And then is it designed as kind of a like you start here and then you go into room 1, room 2 and kind of go, or is it kind of more free flowing than that?
It is by room, but they did a really smart thing. It's not chronological, thankfully. So it's actually by subject area. So where do stories come from? Innoventions, the parks, exploration. So they do a good job of combining older and newer content in each gallery. So you don't have to wait a really long time if you're a young kid to see something that you recognize. So I think that was a very smart move on their part. But it is 10 distinct galleries around 10 distinct kind of areas.
Perfect. And you did mention that exiting through the gift shop, if you will, the classic theme park trope. But do you have Disney 100 specific merchandise in there, or
Yes.
is this what kind of merchandise can we expect?
So they actually did a ton of unique publications for the Disney 100. So there is a catalog that goes with the exhibition. There's a coloring book. One of the cool things of this exhibition that I really loved, there were 2 artists that created bespoke posters. So each section has a poster that was designed. So all of those posters are for sale in the store. And if I didn't just finish covering every inch of wall space I have in my new apartment, I probably would be buying them. So there's those. There's Disney 100, Franklin Institute specific merchandise, and then a little smattering of things from like Marvel and Star Wars and stuff in there as well. But there's some really great themed Disney 100 stuff in there.
I love it. And it is it's $45, correct?
So $45 includes the full museum plus the exhibition. That's for adults. It's $41 for kids. We do exhibit only hours. So on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday evenings, starting at 5 p.m., you can get a $25 ticket just to go to Disney. So that does not include the museum. So that allows for us to, people that might not have kids, that don't want to spend all day in a science center, there's an option for that as well.
Catering to the Disney adult, and I think if you tell anybody $25 for a ticket to go to Disney, you're sold. So you're
it's a pretty good deal.
Absolutely. And how long is the exhibition going through? I know it starts with you guys in Philadelphia, I believe heads to Chicago after that, but how long do guests have to see it at the Franklin Institute?
It will be open until August 27th.
Wonderful. And that's 7 days a week and then those weekend hours?
Yep.
Wonderful. And then if any of our listeners have any questions, where should they kind of go and check that out?
Yep. So fi.edu is the Franklin Institute website, and everything you would want to know, Disney, preparing for your visit, how to get here, tickets, all there.
Perfect. And then the last question I've got, I want your kind of elevator pitch as the chief experience and strategy officer. If people are on the fence, which after listening to this podcast, they shouldn't be, they hear the family dynamic, they hear the genuineness in both of our voices. But if they're on the fence and coming to the Disney 100 exhibit, why is the Franklin Institute the perfect place to kind of see this exhibition, and why is this exhibit perfect for the Franklin Institute?
Yeah, I think I'll speak as if you were an outside of a Philadelphian and you're traveling to the city of Philly. I think Philly in general is a great place. I think being able to combine your visit to see the Disney 100 with the great food scene and the history of Philly and making a weekend out of it, there's no better city for that. I think it's just, there's something to be said to seeing an exhibition at its first venue. It's brand new. It's sparkly. It hasn't had the wear and tear of a long tour. I really think that this is a very unique exhibition, and Archives did a really fantastic job of bringing together this number of artifacts in a design aesthetic that I don't think any of their shows have really had before. They have definitely loaned out their artifacts to various museums who have put on their own shows, but I think the company they partnered with, like the design of this space is really quite lovely, and they were very thoughtful about how they did that. So I just, even if you're not like a huge Disney fan, if you like a good exhibit and you're doing experiences and that's something that you're interested in, you need something to do with friends or family, it's a great place.
I love it. And then outside of Disney, what else is going on at the Franklin Institute right now?
Well, while we're doing this, we're also in the process of redesigning our whole building. So we're turning 200 next year. We had a huge project that we put together before the pandemic that got kind of parsed back a little bit after the pandemic, but we are overdue in redesigning most of our exhibitions. So we will be opening one exhibition a year starting this fall. So the first exhibit that we will be embarking on is an exhibit on space, and that will be a 7,000 square foot brand new exhibit over 2 floors in our building. Super awesome. We're actually working with a design company out of Orlando who does a lot of work for Disney and Universal. So trying to bring that attraction, entertainment, vibe, and design into the building, not only in our special exhibition space, but also in the other exhibits that we create. So we've been having a really great time with that.
I love it. Awesome. That's going to do it for this week's episode of the Coaster 101 podcast. Abby, thank you so much for joining us. But after you visit the Franklin Institute website to learn more about the Disney 100 exhibition, make sure you visit our website, coaster101.com. We are also on social media anywhere you can really consume the platform. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. Look for us at Coaster101. You'll be able to find us somewhere. If you're listening, make sure you're liking, rating, reviewing, subscribing, telling your friends to listen, and leaving us those 5-star ratings and reviews on Spotify and Apple Podcast. We obviously love listening to those, and the better reviews we get, the more reviews we get, the better guests we continue to get, and the show continues. So everybody really wins in that regard. So all it takes is a really quick 5-star click, maybe a couple nice words on Apple Podcasts, but we would really appreciate it. A huge thank you, as always, to JMMD Entertainment for our theme music, and we will talk to y'all again soon. See ya.